Hey there, Jeff Manchester here with iZotope. It's time for another How to Do Everything in Product X video, and today we're going to cover iZotope Ozone 10. If you're unfamiliar with this series, it's where we take our time going over a tool from scratch, almost like a visual manual. We've done videos in this series for Nectar and Neutron, and recently the incredible Boris on the Native Instruments side starred in a two-part series on how to do everything in Machina, so please check that out. Now, back to the matter at hand. Ozone 10 is a mastering suite that has everything you need to master a song. It's also worth mentioning that if you own Ozone 10 Advanced, you can use the modules I'll be showing you as component plugins, so you can break them out of the Ozone mothership and just use, say, the Impact module or Low-End Focus, for example, on an individual track. Now, speaking of the tools that you have in this suite, you have vintage modules, you have modern modules, you have intelligent assistive technology, you have referencing capabilities. The value you get from the tool set included in Ozone is pretty tremendous. So kick up your feet or use the chapter markers below to skip ahead to a module that you've always wanted to learn more about in Ozone. Enough talk, let's jump in. Okay, so we find ourselves in Logic. You can follow along with whatever digital audio workstation you love. FL Studio, Pro Tools, completely up to you. We're in Logic, so that's where I like to be. Now, let's start completely from scratch. I'm going to bring Ozone in. As long as you have an empty output or stereo bus, you can just go and do what I'm doing in your DAW. In this case, we'll go to Audio Units, and I will navigate to Ozone 10, which is right here. Stereo. There we go. And here it is. I'll close this little area because a lot of people think that these options are Ozones. They're not. They're just Logic. So there we go. And this is the view that I think most people are familiar with when they think of Ozone, where we have a module and its controls and parameters. Maximizer, these are its controls. EQ, these are its controls. We have an I/O section over here. We have the global presets menu here where we can toggle on different parameters that will affect the entire Ozone mothership. We have individual module presets over here. Click these three bars, you get individual maximizer presets. And you can also pull on this little guy and it will expand or contract and resize. Now, when I say this is what most people are familiar with, I'm setting the table because we actually have, I think, a much better and new, frankly, starting point with our assistant view right here. So if I click on this tab, now I have this screen. So we have an animation here. It's in idle kind of mode, just pulsing back and forth. It's asking us to play some audio. It's waiting for us to give it something to train itself on. And that's how the assistant works. It's going to listen to our track and then match it to a target reference and then match our track to meet the dynamics, the width, the loudness of an ideal reference track. And it's going to do all of this through intelligence and machine learning and smart DSP. But first, we have to give it some audio just to get started. And at the very bottom here, you'll see for best results, play the loudest part of your track. That's why I have a cycle in Logic, they're called cycles, or a loop set up over here in yellow with just the chorus. You'll want to make sure that you're giving Ozone a loud moment that's full of energy and really well tonally balanced, and not the quiet moment, because if you train Ozone on a quiet moment, the settings might not generalize very well to the louder parts of the track. So it's important to have a nice loud section for this training pass. So I have my loop, I have Ozone, we're all ready to go. It's waiting for audio. I'm going to give it some by pressing the space bar. So now we have this brand new view from which we can, at a very high level, control the tone of our track that we're trying to master here. So you'll see there's a couple of new things if you're a seasoned Ozone user. We have At the very left here, these targets, and then we have probably a more familiar view, this tonal balance control like spread of information with this blue kind of wormy looking thing going from left to right. So what does this all mean? How's it working? So starting with the targets, we have, as you can see, a number of different genres here: cinematic, country, EDM, folk. We happen to land on hip hop / rap. Now, when I mentioned earlier that iZotope Ozone is intelligent, this is what I was talking about. It was able to know that this track is kind of in the rap, hip hop domain territory, and it settles on this as a target. Now, these targets are built out of analyzing thousands and thousands of chart-topping, great-sounding songs in the folk, EDM, country, hip-hop, jazz vein. And then, once Master Assistant determines that our track is one of these targets, hip-hop and rap, it adjusts the dynamic tone to meet the most popular great-sounding rap and hip-hop tracks of the moment. So that's what's going on here. This spread represents the ideal tonal balance of great rap and hip-hop tracks. You'll see that as I move this around, the spread changes because different genres and different targets have different kind of rules about an ideal tonal balance, right? So pop, hip-hop, R&B, reggae, and rock down here. Let's go back to hip-hop and rap. There we go. So a few other things to note. If you might be thinking to yourself, well, I have a track that I want to use as a reference, and it doesn't really match any of these iZotope targets here. It's very easy for folks to go over here and add their own reference by clicking this plus button. A dialog comes up. Now I'm in my Great References folder as a favorite on my menu, and we've got this track called Machine Gun. Let's have a listen.
Born this way. Before you patronize me with dollar analyzations, take a step back, look at yourself. You may be the only one you can help, 'cause I can't stop.
So if I want, I can say, I want this to be the reference that Master Assistant is using to guide the parameters to kind of, push my source track toward, this North Star, this Machine Gun track. So this is going to be my reference. All I have to do is open this, and now we get the same animation, building your mastering chain. It's listening for the reference, listening to the source material, trying to match the width, the loudness, the dynamics of my track to this Machine Gun track. And here is the tonal balance spread that it's come up with for this custom curve. And you can see that it's copied the data here, Machine Gun by Caleb. It's right there, and we can use this as our reference now. I'm actually going to hit the trash can icon to get rid of this guy and go back to the targets. But now you know what's going on with these targets mean and how it all kind of works. I'll settle back on the hip hop rap target right here. Now let's talk about this curve here. So we have this blue curve running low, low mid, and high. And these four quadrants represent our spectrum, right? So low frequencies, low mid frequencies, high mid frequencies, and high frequencies. In fact, we can solo them just by playing and pressing there. So this white line represents the source track and how it's measuring up against this blue tonal balance ideal distribution of energy. The thing that is getting that white line to conform and meet this target, the hip hop rap target, is the EQ and the stabilizer. So what we can do is move this EQ up and down and move the stabilizer up and down. And what I'm doing here is I'm pushing the parameters within the EQ and stabilizer modules to further meet this tone, this target here. So what do I mean by that? Well, EQ represents the EQ module in Ozone. So if I bring this all the way to 100% and scale it all the way there, I'll click back on the detailed view and go to the equalizer. And now we have the amount over here at 100%, right? If I bring this down, I'm scaling it like a wet dry to 0. So I'm not going to get any of these EQ changes, which are contributing in part to the white line meeting this curve. So because I have it down here at 0, it's going to struggle a little bit to form and mold within that blue outline. The stabilizer is still doing some work, so it's not completely out of whack with this background. Let's bring this back, double click to return it to default. Now the stabilizer is the second part of this tone EQ shaping, helping me meet this blue blob here. So same thing, I can scale it between 0 to 100%. 100, I'll go over here and find the new stabilizer module. And now the amount is at 100. And just for demonstration purposes, I bring it back to 0. The amount is 0. So we're kind of like puppet mastering some of the modules in the detail view from this very handy, easy to use, high level master assistant view. So the EQ and the stabilizer are going to help us meet this hip hop rap target. And you can turn them on and off too with these little icons here. And by the way, you might notice this little yellow box with text showing up whenever I hover over something and let the cursor settle. These are tooltips. If I want, I can turn them on or off by going over to the gear wheel, General, Show Tooltips. I can turn them off now when I leave my cursor over something. We don't get any text, but it's just helpful for you if you're a first-time user or you want to dig a bit deeper into Ozone to leave tooltips on and then learn a little bit about what each parameter does. And I think our technical writer will be very happy if you go ahead and read everything because they work very hard to make sure everything is labeled appropriately and easy for you to understand. So let's leave EQ and stabilizer where they are. We've talked about the targets. Let's go to the bottom half of the page to width match, dynamics match, and then this optimize section. So when I was talking about matching during that listening pass, Ozone is also going to listen to the reference, the target in this case, the hip hop one, and that has a kind of informed width to it. And then it listens to your source track and goes, the hip hop and rap tracks that we're hearing are normally this wide. Your track is not that wide. Let's push it up a little bit and scale the imager module to make sure that your track is as wide as the reference track in this target. So we can control the scaling just like we did on EQ and stabilizer from here. So again, we're talking to another module in the detailed view, in this case, the imager module, which is a very famous module in Ozone. So I can bring it all the way to 100%. Go here just to show you amount 100. It's like a wet dry, right? I can go all the way down 0%. Okay. And you can also look at this little metering system here, this vector scope, to make sure that you are good. So have a look and have a listen. Leave that there. Now we have dynamics match here. So we are actually also able to match the microdynamic energy of your track against the microdynamic energy, ideal energy of a target, in this case, hip hop and rap. And this is really, really interesting. We'll talk more about microdynamics once we get to the impact module, but suffice to say, you can also scale or turn this off and on through this little gauge here. So again, I'm leaving it at 0, it's still on. If I go to the detailed view and go to the impact module, brand new, you'll see amount 0, okay? If I go back here, turn it up, look at that, 100% amount right there, okay? So we can scale this to add some movement and rhythm to this track. Now on the maximizer side, we have up or down 4 decibels, okay? And typically if we're on a target here, the maximizer's threshold will settle to amount to about -10 LUFS. And that's because we're optimized here for streaming. If we're optimized for the DJ player, it's another 2 LUFS down, so -8 LUFS, and still scaling plus or minus 4 decibels, okay? But settling right here is going to be -8 for the DJ player, and right here for streaming. And the other thing you should know is that if we're on streaming, we have a ceiling. Let's go to the maximizer over here, a ceiling of -1 dB and true peak on, okay? But if I go over here to DJ player, we go right up to the line here, -0.1 dB and true peak is off. And this is just because for a DJ, when you're performing, when you're playing a track out, it's going to be louder, it's going to be hotter than it will be for a streaming service where we have that -1 dB ceiling to make sure that, once we go from lossless to loss C, any algorithms aren't bringing the body of the audio up. You're protected with that 1 dB. And also, we have loudest normalization now across all streaming services. We don't have to be as loud as the DJ player. -8 LUFS, -10 is pretty safe and pretty comfortable. So that explains why we have these parameters here. Again, you can go up or down, and you can even see in this scrolling here the effect of the maximizer on your track. So let's actually take a look as we move this up and down. Let's go back to streaming. So the maximizer is working a bit harder now on the waveform. Bring it back to the center. Or we could lower it. Maximizer's not working as hard. Now, one thing I want to do is a before and after, right? Because it's important to see where we're going. I'm going to default things back to where they were when we first started. So we'll bring this back to the hip hop rap. I believe we're at halfway here and around halfway here. Impact was all the way up. We're on streaming. We can more importantly do a gain matched bypass. So as I click this little icon here, we're going to make sure that the after isn't significantly louder than the before. What we're really going to hear is the effect of these modules on the track. The reason we want to do this, especially in mastering, is to make sure that we can objectively gauge how things sound before and after. Usually, without a gain matched bypass, you'll probably think the after sounds better because it's going to be louder. Well, this takes the loudest into account and gives you a more objective before and after, so you don't get fooled into thinking, of course it sounds better because it's louder, right? So now let's turn this on and let's do a before and after. I'm not going to talk. I'll just toggle this bypass on and off, and let's have a listen. So we have, in my opinion, a cleaner, clearer after, thanks, I think, in large part to the EQ coming out of this tone match section. And that's the stabilizer and the EQ module working to fit and match and conform to this hip hop tone here, this blue blob. I never know what to call it, like a worm or a blob or whatever. It's like a wormy blue blob. Okay. We can also relearn if we want. If we want to start from scratch, we can do that too just by hitting this over here, okay? And then we'll start the process all over again. I'll just X out of that. So we have gone over the main Master Assistant window. It's time to move into the detailed view, and I can do that just by clicking over here, and now I'm in the detailed view. I'm going to close all these guys out though. And the reason I want to do this is because I want to talk about Ozone in terms of clusters of similar processing. You'll notice on this plus button here, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, the value in Ozone is insane. It's not just a mastering suite. It's an entire Swiss Army knife tool set. Look at all these modules that you get. And these can also be used, like I mentioned, as component plugins. So if you just want to bring one thing and not the whole mothership, you just want to bring the exciter, the imager, the impact, whatever, you can have that on your track at an insert level, not on the master bus. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of choice of modules here. So as I was saying, I want to cluster the next kind of the half of this video in terms of similar processing categories. So what do I mean by this? Well, there's a lot of different EQs. Why don't we start by talking about all the different kind of EQ stuff in Ozone? Then we'll talk about the dynamic stuff, and then we can move on to some more bells and whistle stuff and see how much time we have at the end. But let's bring up EQ1. There's two EQs, by the way. They're both the same, EQ1 and 2, but I'm just going to bring one in. The dynamic EQ, let's bring in as well the match EQ. Let's also bring in the vintage EQ, and we're also going to bring in the stabilizer, which is a type of EQing in my opinion, although there's some compression kind of built in. So I'll save the stabilizer for last, and we'll go through the EQs together. So first things first, with the modules, you can solo them, okay, by pressing S right there. You can turn them off and on, and you already know you can rearrange them. And there's also some helpful metering here as you gain stage and think about the level going one to another here from left to right with these two little icons here. And this little 3-bar thing represents individual module presets. So if you're brand new to any of the modules here, just go over here, click them, and now you can move in real time between the different presets. Okay, I'm going to just bring things back to the beginning here. Now, we have a number of options here for the EQs, pretty much the same in dynamic and the regular parametric equalizer that we're starting on here. We have two modes to view things. This is very parametric. I'm dragging, I'm creating different, curves and shapes. I can go to the global view though, and do a lot of my work, especially my eye work here, to see where we are in the frequency area from here. So I can move things around here. I can change shapes from here. I can solo. I can turn these bands on and off. This is perhaps a more old school way of working. If you're tactile like me, you're going to go back to this way, and you're just going to kind of click and draw and drag your EQ nodes in. The other thing I'll tell you is that the EQ is very contextual. So if we are pulling in a node from the left here, it's already a low shelf. This is pretty common for folks to get rid of some mud or kind of tame the subsonic frequencies here and not have them enter too much into the signal chain. And if we're on the high end here, I'll just delete this so you can see. We click and drag with the plus button, we automatically get, look at that, a high shelf. If we add a node in between 1 and 2 here, left and right, extreme left and right, it's kind of automatically, a bell shape of some sort. And that is very typical because in this area, we're usually just kind of boosting and cutting at very kind of, fine levels, where over here, we're doing more kind of scooping and tilting and shelving and that kind of thing. So that's something else that you should know. Now there's two different modes here. There's an analog and a digital. And this has implications for the sound, obviously, but also this has implications in terms of phase. So I bet you didn't know this. If we go to digital, and let's say I make a big boost like that, I can actually go over here to this partition and change the phase. Now we're not going to see very much in terms of the UI here change, but watch this. When I go to this gear wheel, go to the equalizer, I can show these extra curves, which give me insight into what's happening with phase. So as I get rid of this little heads-up display for a moment, we see in purple, phase response, phase delay, and I'll turn this on, group delay over here. So what you can do in digital is get a look at what's happening with the phase, go over here and change from, 0 to 100%. And this is very important if you're doing a lot of spiky, sort of like heavy boosts and cuts and things like that. You're going to mess, or you could mess with phase, you could introduce ringing, all that stuff. This is a really interesting way to get a bit of a handle and to see what's happening with the phase relationship of your EQ work. So I'll close that out, and I'll also go over here and get rid of these extra views by going there. Okay. In terms of adding nodes and things like that, like I said, you can click. In terms of moving them around, you can also click here and just use your keyboard. I can go down on I'm on the pad here, so left, right, up, down. So I can go down. It's going to go down, up. If I hold shift and do that, we're going to go up and down in larger increments. Same thing with left and right. Okay. I can also hold command or control on a PC and do those same moves, and we have much finer increments now as we move up and down. You can see in the gain there in the heads-up display, 2.7, 2.5, 2.4, 2.3, same thing left to right. So we can get really kind of detailed and conservative with how much these nodes travel around. So that's something else to note as well. We also have stereo and mid-side and left and right. This is one of the only plugins that iZotope makes actually that lets you get this level of mid-side left-right control. We also have an amount slider, which we talked about. We can scale almost like a wet dry or EQ moves, and we don't stop at 100. We can go all the way to 200. do some really extreme moves here so you can scale things to your liking. Okay. Heads up display, frequency, gain, Q. If you want to change the Q, just grab on these little handles and you can see the numbers change there as I move in and out. We can also solo things from here. I should mention that if you want, you can hit Option and you get a bit of a flashlight solo on the spectrum. And if you want to change the width of this solo, go to the gear, go to equalizer, and you can change the alt solo filter Q from 3 to something else, okay? So that is, in a nutshell, the EQ. If we go to dynamic EQ, the same principles apply. We actually have fewer nodes, I believe, to play with here. I think we have 6 instead of, I think we have 8 over here in the main equalizer. Yep, that's it. So over here, and I'm just going to turn this off so it doesn't affect what I'm doing on this one, it's an EQ as well. We have analog, we have digital, we have stereo, we have left, right, and mid side. But we now have dynamic nodes, okay? So what we can do is we can suppress certain frequency information if we want to. These little arrows are going to tell you if we're poking things down or expanding things in an upward way. And we also get controls like threshold, and there's even auto scale to really fine tune and customize and tailor the behavior and the ballistics of the dynamic EQ work we're doing. So if I want to go all the way down here and suppress information at, let's say, 223 hertz, bring the threshold down to get a more extreme projection. Turn auto scale on or off. I usually leave it on. Narrow my width. If I want to do the opposite and go up here, go up like that. And now I'm boosting every time the signal crosses that threshold. So pretty simple, right? And you can do this and have, a number of nodes acting dynamically and a number of ones, acting statically in the first parametric EQ. It's totally up to you. So we've been talking about parametric EQs, digital, modern. We also have vintage EQ, okay? So this is modeled after a Pultec MEQ5 and EQP1A. We've sandwiched both models into one interface here. And you'll notice that we can't really play with this screen here. We have to control things like this with these little encoders. So I can do my boosts and cuts. Actually, in Pultec gear, you can boost and cut at the same time. It's kind of why people love them. You can also work mid-side left to right here. So I'll just make some moves here and you can see what's happening with this display here. And let's do a little before and after. Before, let me turn the other guys off here. And of course, if you're completely new to working with analog gear, especially Pultec gear, just go into the presets right here and just play around and find something that works for you that you like from the dedicated module presets. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time here. It is kind of what it says on the tin. It's a vintage EQ, Pultec, a nice vintage sound, a more colored sound. It definitely has a tone to it that you won't get with the dynamic EQ, perhaps if you're using these EQs in analog mode over digital. So just about flexibility and giving you some choice on what kind of tone or vibe you want to impart on your master with an EQ. So next up, we have match EQ. So this is really interesting referencing technology where if you want to take the sonic profile of something in your session and impart it onto your track, you can do it with this module. You could do it before in the Master Assistant with those targets, or you can go in this kind of other way. I happen to have a track here that is hiding. It's secret. It's over here. And it's that machine gun track again. So let's go to a moment in that song and I'll show you how this all works. So let's say that we love the tone of that machine gun track and we want to rip that kind of EQ out and impose it onto our track's overall EQ. I'm going to solo this track Machine Gun, I'll go and see if I can find like a chorus. So what I'll do is first follow the instructions, right? We want to capture the reference. So I'll press capture and I'll play and just have it listen to a couple of seconds of audio so that it has a nice representative sample. Press stop, and this yellow trace represents the Machine Gun track. So I will take this out of solo and I will go back over here to my track and I'll get a nice sample of that track as well and press capture. Good enough for me. So now my blue is my source track, the reference is the yellow track, and this other line that we're seeing is the kind of average of our imparting the reference on top of the source. So just let's go to the first two colors here. The gold, we can see the gold, the reference track has a bit more top end after 6K. And my other track, my blue track here, has a lot more subsonic frequency information here. So what I can do is bring smoothing down, which will give me a much more kind of rigid application of the reference on top of my source track. And I can even bring in the amount of like how much we want to kind of take the, you know, the character of the reference and impose it on the source track by playing with this amount slider. Let's play with some parameters and see where we go. So here's the original. And here's a little bit of the references kind of tonal characteristics over the source. Once again, before, because I was talking. Now we can impose the reference in a stereo way, mid-side as well, or just left, or just right, if you want to get really kind of nerdy about it. And I can also move these parameters here so as to reject, you know, any imposition of the reference curve on this particular area of the frequency spectrum. So I don't want any of the low stuff that it matched from my reference to be imposed on the source. I just want the high stuff. So what I've done is I've rejected everything below 1.5 kilohertz, right? So only the top end is going to be brought in to my source track. Or I can do the opposite. I can say I really love the low end of my reference, but I don't really love the top end that much, so I'm going to go like this. It's up to you, and you can really customize it and smooth, you know, smooth that kind of average curve here and really bring in a lot or a little bit of that track. If we have it at 0, we're not bringing anything in. So it's really up to you how you want to fine tune and kind of work with this matching technology. But you can also save, I should say, your references here, just save them as presets and then kind of call them up when you need them down the road. So totally up to you. You could do this with a full track like I did. You could just go find a snare that you love and capture that snare's tone and then bring it into a snare that you're working on in a mastering context or stem mastering context, not sure. But that is Match EQ in Ozone 10. So next up, we have the stabilizer. And this is an EQ in a way because what it's doing is carefully and subtly shaping your track using EQ nodes in a dynamic sense toward a target, a reference that you have here. So if we go to the left, you'll see that we have all-purpose cinematic. By the way, all-purpose is formerly bass heavy. If you're familiar with that target from Tonal Balance Control, it's the all-purpose now. But you also have another, you know, set of targets here: country, EDM, folk, hip hop, rock. So I'll stay with all-purpose, for example. And there's two ways to use the stabilizer: shape and cut. Shape is going to boost and cut certain frequencies over time as the signal comes in and as stabilizer reacts to it. Whereas cut is only going to cut. It's only going to suppress and just kind of knead out the kinks of your track and make sure that it's nice and smooth and balanced. 90% of the time, I'm over here in shape. So the amount scales the gain of the stabilizer's adaptive tonal correction. So if we go all the way here to 100, we're adding about 9 dB. And somewhere in the middle, I think is where you want to be. Let's just start with shape and bring the amount up, and you'll see what happens over here in the display. Before and after, before. So it's determined that we're already low end heavy enough. So it's actually suppressing some information over here, and it's brightening things up quite a bit on the high end. Now, speed is almost like an attack and release. It's like how quickly the ballistics of the stabilizer are reacting to the audio. If we go too high, we might get some artifacts. And smoothing controls the contour of the shaping. So you'll notice that when I bring it down, it's very jagged. It's almost like we have a lot of dynamic nodes that are shaping this. But if I bring it up, it's like we have fewer bands and we have a more smooth kind of contour of the stabilization process. Let's bring it up. So as you can see right here, the smoothing is a lot more, smooth. The stabilizer, the contours are much more polite. Bring them down. Much more kind of wild and jagged. And we can click this tame transients to just blunt transient information as it comes in if you're dealing with something that's very kind of percussive and sharp. And these controls down here, low, mid, and high, allow you to customize the amount of stabilization occurring across the low, mid, and high frequencies. So for low, it's about 0 to 60 hertz. For mid, we're talking 60 to about 5.6 kilohertz. And then high, it's 5.6 all the way, above to 20,000 hertz or whatever was sampled. So let's say I want to pull a little bit of, stabilizing energy out of the highs here. Bring smoothing back up. Bring this down. So it's super responsive and adaptive. Now, let's bring this back to high. And what if we wanted to do just cut? Click that, have a look, and have a listen. So this is a great way just to suppress and tame something that might be unruly or might be kind of getting out of control. And we also have delta, which allows you to hear the difference in gain. So what's kind of being taken away or affected by the stabilizer. So now we can hear what we're cutting, what we're pulling out. So it's really designed to be a one-stop shop for, quickly EQing and getting a nice tonally balanced master with one plugin here. But of course, in the assistant, you'll see that the stabilizer and EQ1 work together to get you in that tonally balanced ballpark of whatever target that you're working against. So that represents, I think, all of the EQ options that you have to affect your sonics in mastering with iZotope Ozone 10. Now let's flip over to dynamics processors, of which there are many, and I'll see you once I get everything ordered here. So we're back. We have Impact, Dynamics, Vintage Compressor, Vintage Limiter, and the Maximizer. I want to start with Impact because it is the new kid on the block, and it is really, really exciting to be able to control our music at this microdynamic level. So when I talk about microdynamics, macrodynamics is like the difference in loudness or dynamics between a verse and a chorus. When we talk about microdynamics, we're talking about miniature events in the rhythm, in the tone, in the vocal, in the hi-hat that we can control at a very fine level for the first time. And because we're talking about dynamics, I'm talking about not just suppression or control of dynamic range like we would a compressor. I'm talking also about expansion and highlighting, elevating certain moments. And one of the nice things about the Impact module is that I can control the movement of the energy and sync it to a host tempo or have it kind of free throw if I want with this option right here, the sync option. So it's really a whole new way to bring movement and energy to an entire mix that we can't really do with a compressor or, another dynamics tool. And also being able to move these things around with like one slider up and down is also very new and very exciting. So enough of me talking. Why don't we just explore this module a little bit as the audio plays. So for example, I can bring number 1 up and we have our band here preset. I can solo it. That's the 808. Bring this down. 808 in the kick. They're kind of one and the same, aren't they? So let's unsolo this. So we are now bringing up, expanding the microdynamics of just this one band from 0 to about, 160 hertz, really making that 808 sing. And we can also sync it to a tempo. In this case, this track isn't synced to the host tempo in Logic, but you can do it in 16th notes, 8th notes, dotted notes, triplets, all the way to 32. So it's really interesting. We'd also just like kind of free do it here in milliseconds if we want to. 80 is the default. Let's take a look at what's over here in this next band. So some vocals and a clap. Let's bring this out. That clap really comes to life in band 3. So I am expanding, and we can see in the trace here 4 specific sections with these 4 sliders, and they're all synced to 16th notes. This is really interesting. Let's go before and after. I'm actually going to turn these guys off so they don't influence anything. I'll leave the maximizer on, actually. Just bring the ceiling down a little bit. Before and after. I could also link the bands together and do the opposite. I could compress. So we were expanding, now I can compress, and it's going to respect the values that I had before, but bring everything down at the right increment. We have a delta over here as well, which allows us to hear the difference in processing, so what we're kind of manipulating, but just solo that. So we also have auto, which means that makeup gain is going to be automatically applied and compensated for. This will make sure that you don't have too big of a kind of gain jump as you're, expanding, certainly. And with this on, we get more kind of transparent changes. We're still hearing the rhythm kind of move around and stuff, but it's not so kind of blunt and in your face, certainly on the 808 and stuff like that. Before and after. We also have stereo link. When you click this on, we're going to apply similar processing based on the mid channel to what's happening on the left and the right channel. When you deselect this, it's going to kind of respect where things are in the stereo field and apply microdynamics processing accordingly. So we can also apply things in mid-side here, like I was mentioning earlier. Stereo link goes away. Very comprehensive, easy to use module for just adding a bit of movement, timing it to the tempo of the session. It's all really kind of cool just to get your toes tapping and your listeners kind of engaged a bit more, while making, I think, a lot of complex dynamics processing really, really easy with just a few controls here. This is Dynamics. It is actually a multiband compressor. I said multiband. How do I add bands? Hover over here, click the plus, click the plus, click the plus. Now we have 4 bands. We've salamied up the spectrum here, and we can actually press learn to have these guys adjust accordingly. So Ozone just found the right kind of crossover points for all those bands. I think I'm going to give a break to some folks that have heard this vocal enough. I'm actually going to go and just mute all these vocals down here so that we're just hearing the beat. I think this will be especially helpful for people who are just trying to hone in to, the dynamics processing on the body of the audio and not so much the voice. So a compressor is a compressor is a compressor, right? We have these bands, and depending on where you're clicking, you can see the colors change. Blue for the first, purple for the second, or pink, red, and then a light kind of blue over here for the fourth. If I want to, I can link all the bands together. When I press this, any moves that I do are going to be mirrored across all the bands. This can be really helpful for mastering engineers that are using multi-band compression to make sure that everything's kind of mirrored and transparent. So with that engaged, ratio, let's say I want to do 10:1, right? If I go over to the second band, it's 10:1. The red band, the third one, it's 10:1 as well. Same as this one. If I want to bring the threshold down, they're all down. Okay, so you can link the bands and mirror the parameter changes that you make. We have a limiter up here. We have a compressor, right? Ratio, attack, release, our knee over here. And this is one of the nice things is we have this extra display here where you can see with a different kind of metering system the effect of your processing, right? And watch as I move the knee around here. Let me bring the threshold down. And if you get close, you can see the knee changing softer to harder, okay? So we also have parallel for each band because I could link, if I link these, they're all going to go down, to 52%, but I could unlink them and have certain ones that are parallel and others that aren't. This is your wet and dry, right? And you also have per band gain controls to bring the body of the audio up after you've compressed. And of course we have a makeup gain over here, and this is a intelligent release control over here. Now I want to turn your attention to these icons over here. So this is obviously one way for us to view the frequency area here, okay? We can solo it. Over here we have a gain trace, which is another way for you to kind of view your dynamics processing and its impact. But we also have a sidechain detection system here. So this is really helpful if you want to exclude certain frequencies from the compressor so that the compressor, what it's reacting to, is kind of what you want it to react to. So what a lot of people will do is they'll go over here and introduce a high pass so that low frequencies don't trigger the compressor, which can cause the compressor to work a little harder than it should, the compressor to pump a little bit. You'll see that we have this high pass, which you can then go and customize over here. You can even add a tilt shape. It's totally up to you. And you can even scale the amount here with that amount slider. So what a lot of people will do, certainly for bass heavy music, is just exclude the low frequencies from the sidechain input so that the compressor doesn't kind of react, because it's the first thing it'll react to, the loudest thing is that, low end. And cause things to pump in an unnatural, unpleasant way. Some people like the pumping, totally up to you, but now you know what's happening over here with these controls. So that is, very quickly, the Dynamics multiband compressor from Ozone. Going over here, we have a much more simplified compressor. This is the vintage compressor. And right off the bat, you see the sidechain input right here. And we also have another gain trace. We can go mid-side or left and right. We could also do that if you didn't know that. I think I mentioned that here, mid-side on the compressor in the dynamics module. So let's just turn this back off. And where the real action's at here on the vintage compressor is in these modes. I'm going to toggle the tooltips just to help me a little bit because there's a lot to remember in Ozone. And what you'll see here is as I settle on one, you'll see the characteristics of that mode displayed in the tooltip. So for sharp mode, this is going to give us, as it says, a greater emphasis on dynamic transients for a tight percussive sound. Balanced, if I move this up, hover over that. Balanced is a signal-dependent blend between dynamics and overall body of the signal. And smooth, which is what I prefer, is a greater emphasis on the body of the signal, giving less dynamic feel but fuller sound. So I'm going to back this off so everything is included here. I'm going to bring the threshold down. Course, attack and release as well, gain, and we have the auto makeup gain there. What I'll do is just cycle between sharp, balanced, and smooth. Use your ears, get some good headphones, and see if you can kind of hear the difference that each mode brings to the audio. So obviously we have a lot of gain reduction depending on the mode that we're in, but we're not actually mastering. I want you to hear the effects of each mode. So I wanted to make sure it was dramatic enough for you to go, oh, I can hear that. Okay, so let's move on to the vintage limiter. So vintage, now we're in the vintage limiter. Again, I'll get true peak going. I'll bring the ceiling down. I'm going to disable the maximizer so that it doesn't influence what you're hearing. And I'll bring this threshold down a little bit. And again, let's look at the tooltips and see what they have to say about the modes. For analog, it says tight bass response with a thick vintage limiting. For tube, we have a smooth feedback limiter with modern precision. And for modern, which is my favorite, we have vintage limiting with increased clarity and presence. So I like the top end that's kind of retained with the modern ones. But oxymoronic, isn't it? A modern mode and a vintage compressor. Anyway. Let's cycle between those. And character is really just an attack and release control that you can scale with one parameter here. So that's what that does. We have a lot to talk about in the maximizer, which is one of the things that we're really known for. So let's start with the left side here. We have these different IRCs, which stand for Intelligent Release Control. There's quite a few of them. There is no right or wrong one to use. Really, you should use your ears and also whatever your computer can handle because some of them are more CPU intensive than others. I will say that IRC LL stands for low latency. Okay, so that's the one that you want to use if you're dealing with a computer that has like a suboptimal kind of performance to it. So IRC LL 1, 2, 3, and there's different modes within 3 and 4. And they will each impart different sonic characteristics to your track. What I want to do is bring the ceiling to about -1. I want to get some compression going, some limiting going. Not too much. And I want to go over these different IRCs. Let's start with these 3. So IRC LL, if we hover over it, smooth and thick limiting for a rich sound, low latency. IRC 1, smooth and thick limiting for a rich sound. And 2 is clear and sharp limiting to preserve peaks. Let's go between IRC LL 1 and then 2, remembering the descriptors that I gave you a moment ago. Now we have IRC 3, and there's 4 different modes: pumping, balance, crisp, and clipping. If I hover over that, it's going to tell us that it is surgical limiting tailored to your audio. So of course you should use these different ones here to see which one you like the most. I should mention that we actually have a really handy and clever mode here that lets us audition different IRCs or any parameters, frankly. So I could set this to balanced here in A. Go down here and set B to pumping. I could set crisp to C, and then for D, I could set this to clipping. And now we can hear all the styles as I go between them, right? So let's start with pumping. Last but not least, we have the final IRC, and there are 3 modes here. IRC 4, we have classic, modern, and transient. And just as a reminder, spectral shaping for reduced pumping and distortion. The latest, greatest, and also most CPU heavy IRC of them all. Let's start with classic. Those are the different intelligent release controls. I cannot tell you which one to use. You have to decide which to use based on your ears and the material that's going through the maximizer. We also have over here a true peak on or off, a ceiling, which we can control the threshold. One of the great things about Ozone is you can actually have it learn the threshold. So let's say that I want this track to be -7 LUFS. I'll press learn threshold and watch the threshold adapt and try to keep this whole track at -7 LUFS. -7 LUFS integrated, right? So it's trying to hug and make sure that we kind of keep the car on the road at that same speed or at that same level, -7 LUFS. So a very handy thing for people that just want to kind of set things and forget things. It's going to hug the turns and go into kind of automatic mode for you. We also have a character, slow, fast, attack and release, right? The real big story, I think, of this release of Ozone 10 in the Maximizer, as far as the Maximizer is concerned, is the Magnify Soft Clip mode. So this is really great because this comes in before the IRC. So it's not adding gain afterwards and causing trouble as far as the ceiling and the threshold is concerned. It's coming in before. So we have 3 different modes here of soft clipping. We have light, moderate, and heavy. And they're all going to be, dependent on whatever you want to do with your particular track. So if we put light on here, we're going to get not just a high fidelity level boost, but also a little bit of saturation. Just going to adjust my threshold so we're not too loud. All right, let's bring this guy in. Let's bring medium in. We don't have to go all the way with the amount. This track is already pretty hot, so I don't have to go all the way. I don't want to start getting into trouble, but just have a listen. So we're getting into some pretty clippy territory here. Here's heavy. Even at 27%, listen to how the claps and everything just comes to life. Let's go before and after. So people have been asking for soft clipping in Ozone for a while now. We have 3 different flavors and you can adjust it, and we're really excited about it. So last but not least here, we have transient emphasis. This is going to, I think, do a good job at preserving transients, transient heavy material. It all depends on how much transient information is coming in there. So a number of ways to control the sound and the character of your limiting. Obviously, stereo independence, transient emphasis, soft clip, all this stuff happens before the, I know we're kind of structured in a funky way here with this stuff on the right, which almost makes you think that this happens after. A lot of this stuff happens, most of the stuff happens before we hit the IRC. So we're protecting headroom and we know kind of where we stand in terms of loudness. So that is, I think, going to do it for the tour of the almighty Maximizer. And one more thing though, little individual presets here for the Maximizer, which are amazing from our sound designers. Okay, so we've covered EQ, we've covered compression, we've covered the assistant. Now I want to talk about saturation, and there's a lot of tools to saturate, to pleasantly distort your audio with Ozone 10. The 2 modules that come to mind first and foremost for saturation are the Vintage Tape and the Exciter module. So Vintage Tape is inspired by a healthy Studer A810 2-track tape deck. And it really is just designed to give you all the nice qualities, chaotic qualities, if you will, of a tape deck without the nuisance of having to calibrate it or replace anything. It's a real nightmare if you've ever had to do it in real life. And we have the input drive, bias, harmonics, low and high emphasis, as well as a number of speeds, inches per second IPS. Faster speeds like 30 can improve high frequency response, whereas going over to 15 or 7.5 can bring in some background noise, cause some shifting, but that's maybe a good thing depending on what you're working on. I'm going to leave it at 30 and let's bring the input drive up. So we're not clipping or anything, but obviously we're driving a lot, and so we're getting some crunchiness. Let's back that off. So the bias changes and affects the shape of the distortion curve. If we bring this bias down, we're going to accentuate high frequencies. If we bring it up, we're going to get a very different kind of harmonic saturation footprint. With harmonics, we can add even order harmonics to the signal. And now we can play with low or high emphasis. Depending on what we've done over here, we might want to tame things, brighten things, boost things. It's up to us. Low end's coming through. There's nothing happening on the exciter. I'm going to turn it off, and let's turn our work with the vintage tape on and off. So, a quick tour of vintage tape. This is one that you'll want to use, I think, in conjunction with another saturation module or something like that, just to warm things up. But now you know what it was inspired by and hopefully how to use it. Let's move on to the exciter, which is a very powerful saturation module. Again, you hopefully know how to work around these modules by now. I hit the plus button, I get more bands. And we can slice these up into the frequency segments that we like, or we can hit learn and have the module do the work for us. You want to engage oversampling, which means that you will probably get a bigger CPU footprint, but you're going to get less aliasing distortion when you really drive things with the exciter. So it's there to kind of protect against aliasing distortion. So as you can see, we can affect things in the stereo field or in the mid side, up to you. And oversampling is on. How about instead of doing a super, multi-band thing, we just bring one in and go from there. So first we have dual triode. This is emulating a vacuum tube. It's going to be nice, rich, and warm. Let's bring some in. So next we have triode, and this is modeled after another tube, but we have less overdrive than on the dual triode, and it's still nice and warm and analog-y. So let's bring it in too. I should say that I'm exaggerating some of this stuff so that you can really hear it. Ideally, what you'd want to do when you're actually mastering is bring this guy down to maybe 0, and then this to something pretty conservative, and just slowly bring it in until you like what you hear. Let's keep going. So next up we have warm. This brings in even harmonics that decay pretty quickly. Next up, we have tube. which gives us a clearer kind of distortion, if that makes any sense. It's not as brash and dark as the triode and dual triode. Happier, a bit brighter, but still nice and warm. Next up is tape, and tape offers, I think, a brighter sound overall. People love tape, and I think this is thanks to the odd harmonics. Pretty subtle. Let's see if we can bring that up. Now we are over to our transistors. First with retro. This is more digital. Even at 2.2%, we're getting a lot of action. I mean, that's a vibe right there. One more transistor type here. Let's bring in analog. Cool. So obviously you can mix and match here. You can bring the bands in and enable, link bands here and then bring things up. Everything comes up together. You can choose to have, we have link enabled here. You can choose to have a tube sound at the very tippy top and then something like triode for the very bottom. It's all about experimenting and, getting a sound that you like and then moving on from there. But that is two different ways. First with the tape, the vintage tape module, and now with the exciter, just to warm up, butter up certain sounds for your mastering needs. Okay, we are at the home stretch. Just a few more modules and parameters to go over, starting with the imager. This module allows you to broaden the panorama of the stereo field of a given frequency or the entire track. It's totally up to you. You can also narrow things, which is something that I know a lot of people do, and make mono certain aspects of your track. We also have in the imager now this recover sides feature, which is really clever because what it does is even after you've monoed something, it restores side information to that signal, which can be really helpful for people who want to maintain, let's say, a really nice wide stereo bass, which sounds kind of weird, but stereo bass is really awesome. When you mono it, a lot of that energy disappears and you can restore it and recover it with recover sides. So let's first just talk about what we're seeing here. We have a vector scope, which is a really nice metering tool, honestly, to see where you are in terms of the spread of left and right information. You also have a nice phase correlation meter over here. So if we play some audio, you can see the correlation meter is trending toward the +1, so we're pretty good. You can change the vector scope to Lissajous or Lissajous, polar level, or polar sample. So right now we're just in one band mode here. I can bring this up. So now we're much wider. Getting some red specks though, so we have to be careful. Here's before. After. So we can slice up the bands here as we did before, and let's say make this wider, make this a little bit wider, and make the very top, much wider just for fun. Before. You just want to be careful to keep an eye on this meter right here. If you're trending toward the negative, you could be in trouble. Another really great way to check your kind of monohygiene is to go over to this correlation trace meter. And if you find this line dipping toward negative values or getting red, then you could be in trouble. So let me see if I can bring that on. See a little tip of red there? There it is too. So if we're trending too far to this -1, or if we're seeing red there on that trace, we could be causing phase problems for ourselves. So you want to just be aware of that. Now, that is a kind of quick run through of the imager. I do want to show you recover sides though. So on this track, I happen to have another hidden track here. I have a bass. So I'm going to mute the normal bass. I'm going to go to this bass. I'm going to click here, go to my imager. I want to brighten this guy up quite a bit. So let's turn this on. So you see when I have this off, we're not doing anything. Let's turn this on. So there we have a nice stereoized wide bass. Okay, so when I go back to my ozone on the master track, you'll see here that when I bring, let's go back to this view, slice things up, and let's bring this down. My bass is kind of mono again. If I turn recover sides on like this, I can take what's been folded down and monoized and recover the side information and add it. So we're going to the red a little bit, but listen to the before and after. Here's before with our kind of monoized low end, unfortunately. And after. So our bass is wider, thicker, more vibrant, thanks to the recovery of the sides that this new kind of tool enables. Okay, so now that we've covered the imager, now we get to this little band of misfits here, these modules that kind of don't fit neatly into different kind of categorization types that we traditionally have when we're processing music. Now, I have to bring back my vocals. Okay, so we brought the vocals back, and we have 3 parameters here, very, very simple: vocals, bass, and drums. Through machine learning and neural nets, Ozone can detect these 3 different sources and help you bring them up or down in just one move. And up or down, I should say, by 9 decibels. That's quite a bit. So if you're dealing with a track that you're mastering for someone and you don't have the multi-tracks and they say, oh, can you make the vocal a little bit louder? You're like, well, I can't really go back and mix it again and get it. All I have is a stereo track. You can alter the vocals, bass, or drums with one parameter. So let's bring the vocals up, a couple dB here. keep going. So I'm reaching into this file and just pulling out cleanly the backup vocals, the lead vocal, and just bring them up a little bit closer to the audience, if you will. Or I could take them, back. Now they're sitting a bit more with the arrangement. Let's go before and after. So turn this off and on. So you get really transparent, subtle separation and balancing of these different things. The bass, let's bring this, let's hang out with this and play with this. So the really clever thing that's happening here is it is removing the sustain information from the 808 and just keeping those thuds, right? The initial attacks, because we want those to still be there, because it's able to know what is the percussive element of this 808 and what is the sustain kind of like, bass guitar element of the 808. And it's able to take them out, but also retain the melodic information of those hits, because it is an 808 after all. So it's really, really cool just to get in there in a quick and dirty way and just pull things out or bring things up and rebalance things at a mastering level. Okay, so the next tool that we have is low-end focus. And I think that this also fits into a kind of, dark magic wizardry category, because what it's able to do is pull out the spectral information of the low end, whether it happens to be sustained information or quick kick transient information, and accentuate that or push it back into the background in a really elegant, easy to use way. So there's only 2 or 3 parameters here: contrast, gain, and also the action region, which we can stretch and move to include the frequencies that we want to contrast. So what I like to do is, if I want to bring up the attack, in this case, the hits of that 808, and perhaps even some of the lower end of the claps and the snare, punchy is the way to go. If I want to accentuate or control the sustain elements, like, the bass, or in this case, the 808s, that kind of like sustained boom, 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 that is what Smooth is really, really good at. So now that I've helped your ears orient to what they're about to hear, let's first start with punchy. And we also have a gain amount here, so we can kind of add a bit of gain to what we've contrasted. So I'm going to bring up the contrast on the punchy, listen for the hits of that 808 and some of the bottom part of the snare and clap to come up a little bit. Here's before. So really, those hits are coming up now, and I think in a big way. If we want to do the opposite now, we want to enhance the sustain information. I'm going to switch to Smooth. I'll keep the gain here and just bring the contrast up until I'm happy with what I'm hearing. So again, these moves are very exaggerated. This might sound really loud, but I want you guys to be able to hear the difference and not go like, I can't hear it, what's wrong? So one other way that I've seen this module used is to control some of the already very contrasted elements in a mix. So sometimes when sub bass is out of control, that's when I see people go to Smooth or Punchy and bring the contrast down. And what this ends up doing is creating a bit of an even keel where everything is on the same kind of playing field. In this case, it's going to be hard for me to engineer that, but I would encourage you in your mastering adventures just to play with the contrast, because it is important that things stick out and poke out and we kind of move with stuff in a mix, but also you don't want things to be so bombastic that it can create a disorienting effect on the listener. So making sure that your mixes and masters are dynamically interesting, but not so variable as to upset the listener. This is where bringing the contrast down with one of these modes really, really comes in handy. So the very last thing I want to show you here is the Spectral Shaper. Think of Spectral Shaper like a de-esser, but a very intelligent, powerful multiband de-esser for high frequency information, typically high frequency information, but also low stuff. But it's really great for getting under control content in a master that is at that very high level, 2 to 3, 2K to 10K, that's very sour and tinny and just strident, okay? And you can't really pull out a de-esser or whatever. This is what this is for. And what this represents is a 64 band Mel-spaced EQ that's doing gentle kind of, supple compression in this action region. So if we had a very sharp master where we had really loud, tinny stuff going on in this region, we are able to really just kind of go in there and control it in a very subtle way. So I'm going to go before and after and just listen for an overall softening of the high end. There's not a lot of problems in this track. It's already very well tonally balanced, so you're not going to hear a huge kind of like before and after, but we are just taming and smoothing the area in the action region 2 to about 8K with the Spectral Shaper. Now we can further control the timbre of the Spectral Shaper by moving the tone up or down, brighter or darker. Attack and release controls very similar to, the other ones that we've seen along the way in our compressor and dynamics modules. And we have a delta to hear the difference between the input and output. And we can also process this in stereo or mid-side. And it's also really nice if you want to de-emphasize strident low-end information, and you can control really tubby or kind of out-of-control subsonic frequency information by just bringing the action region down here, bringing the threshold down, and using some gentle spectral shaping just to tame that low end. So a few different ways to control a number of, I think, common problems that show up in a mastering scenario. Now, to close things out, I just want to talk about the I/O section here. This is input and output. I have no processing, so it's going to look pretty similar going in and out. Actually, let me bring in the stabilizer module. So we can control the options right over here for I/O metering options. So we can change the type of metering to RMS, peak, RMS and peak. Right now we're on integrated, but we have the K-weighted system, single peak, momentary. I'll leave it on integrated, and source, stereo, or mid-side. I want to talk about these options in a moment. I'll come back to them, don't worry. But input, output, pretty simple. You can even change the input and output over here just by dragging these guys up and down. So if you get something that's very loud already, you can bring down the input gain and have it a bit quieter so you can do a bit more mastering, get a bit more headroom back. We also have bypass and gain match. You should already know what gain match is because we showed you earlier. And also we have this nice automatic gain match, which hugs the gain you'll see here and moves around with it. That's brand new in Ozone 10, by the way, just allowing you to get a more objective before and after. We also have the mono, sum to mono, and swap channels left to right. There's a codec preview. So if you're going from lossless to lossy encoding and you want to know what your track's going to sound like as an MP3 or AAC with variable bit rates here, not variable bit rates, but different bit rates, you can audition them and solo the artifact. So let's say this is going to become an MP3. I can have a listen to what it'll sound like by going MP3 and let's say 192 kbps. It's not pretty. And we also have a dither section. So if you're going to go from one bit depth to another, so 24 to 16 or 12 or 8, God forbid, you can introduce dithering into your master, and that's what this menu is here for. We'd take another 2 hours talking about this. So all this to say, dithering is here in Ozone. I want to just take a moment to talk about referencing, because there are some powerful referencing technologies within Ozone. So if I click on this button here, I can add a reference, and let's bring in our old friend Machine Gun. I'll open this up, and what it's going to do is take a look through this file and assign these different letters, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, and these represent what the machine learning believes to be the verses and the choruses. You can also just go in and, make a loop here, totally up to you, play it. Now we don't hear anything. Why is that? Hit this button, I can flip to my reference. Go back to my original track, right? I can also bring the gain of the reference up if I need to kind of match it to my track. Or down. So we can create loops. We can even rename them and say chorus or something if I could spell like that. Okay. And here's where it gets really interesting. So remember back in the IO section, I said I'd talk about these little icons here. So we have replace input with reference and show reference spectrum. If I press this, the input will now display the loudness of my reference, and the output will display the loudness of my source track. So I can kind of see where they are loudness-wise at a given time. So right now we're looping this chorus, and if I play this input is the reference. And I can see where it is, around -11, -10, mine's -12. There, they're kind of at parity now. It's just a way for you to visually match, and using your ears too, the loudnesses, because you can see on the input meter what you're working with. And you can also, if we go back here, you'll see this show reference spectrum. So one of the cool things is if I'm hanging out in the equalizer, I can now see the spectra of my reference track and my source track in one metering display. So the track that is shaded in is mine, and the one that's kind of white and outlined is the other one. It's the reference. So if I want to do some tone matching, I can see at a glance right away that the high end here on the reference is a bit more bright than the one I'm working with. So I could bring this note up a little bit, get them at parity. Also, my low end is way out of control compared to theirs, so I could decide to bring mine down, for example. And another trick is I can go to the options and get these equalizers to really slow down. Go to spectrum, and let's change average time to 10 seconds. And look at that, they're really in slow motion now. And I can see a lot better both of the profiles, and then do my EQ work now with a little bit more information now that we've slowed time down a bit. And I believe you can bring, I think, around 14 tracks in here if you want to really, have a bunch of references. A client says, I want my track to sound like this. Bring them all in and work against them, make your loops, and tailor the gains here to make sure that you're in the ballpark as you reference, as you master. So I think that will just about do it. I say just about because we also have some global presets over here that I think I showed very briefly, but you'll see that we have them divided depending on the activity. So if you're working on your mix bus, we have all-purpose mastering. We have the great Calby presets, an amazing mastering engineer. And we also have some custom ones that you can do if you want to bring them in. I had some demos that I was doing, so I have demo presets. So that is another thing that you have there too. And I believe that will do it. So if you've made it this far, congratulations. And now I'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, wow, it's very impressive. If you're still here, why not check out some other videos that we've made around iZotope Ozone 10? They're going to be somewhere here on the screen. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.